I still remember the exact moment my life split into two versions of me. The girl they laughed at, and the woman they would one day beg. It happened in the middle of the cafeteria, under those flickering fluorescent lights that made everyone look a little uglier than they already were, except for her. Of course, she looked perfect even under bad lighting. Vanessa Hale didn't just walk into a room, she owned it, like the world had signed itself over to her the day she was born. And me? I was standing there holding my lunch tray, praying no one would notice the stain on my sleeve. "Wow," Vanessa said loudly, not even looking at me at first, just loud enough for everyone around to hear. "Some people really should learn mirrors exist." Her friends laughed immediately, like trained animals waiting for a cue. I froze, not because it was the first time, it wasn't, but because something in her tone that day felt sharper, deliberate, like she had decided this wouldn't just be another joke. This would be a performance. She turned to me slowly, eyes scanning me from head to toe with exaggerated disgust. "You know what your problem is?" she asked, tilting her head as if she genuinely cared. "You actually think you matter." The cafeteria went quiet. That kind of silence is worse than noise. It stretches, it suffocates, it makes you feel like you're standing naked in front of everyone. I didn't... I started, but my voice betrayed me, cracking in the middle like something fragile snapping under pressure. Vanessa stepped closer. "You don't belong here," she whispered, but loud enough that everyone still heard. "And trust me, you never will." Then she did something small, so small that no teacher would ever punish her for it. She bumped into my tray. Not hard, not enough to look intentional, but enough. My lunch hit the floor. The sound echoed louder than it should have. Sauce splattered across my shoes, my jeans, the tile. And just like that, the room exploded with laughter. I stood there staring down at the mess, my hands trembling so badly I had to clench them into fists just to feel like I still had control over something. And then, through the noise, I heard it. Vanessa's voice again. God, it's like watching something pathetic try to be human. Something inside me shifted. Not broke, not shattered. Shifted. I didn't cry. That's what surprised everyone. I didn't run. Instead, I slowly bent down, picked up my tray, and looked straight at her. For the first time, really looked. Perfect hair, perfect skin, perfect smile, and empty eyes. "You're right," I said quietly. The laughter faded just a little. "I don't belong here." Vanessa smirked, satisfied. She thought she had won. She had no idea that was the moment she lost everything. Because what she didn't understand, what none of them understood, was that when you take everything from someone, when you strip them down to nothing, you don't destroy them, you remove their fear, and a person with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous kind of person in the world. That night, I went home and made a decision. Not a dramatic one. Not the kind people post about or cry over. A quiet decision. The kind that changes everything. I opened my old laptop, the one that overheated if you looked at it wrong, and stared at the screen for a long time. No friends, no support, no second chances, just me. "Fine," I whispered to myself. "If I don't belong in your world." My fingers hovered over the keyboard. "I'll build my own." And that's exactly what I did. But if I had known back then where that path would lead me, if I had known that one day Vanessa Hale would walk into my office, not as a queen, but as a desperate woman asking me for a job, I might have been a little more afraid of what I was about to become. Or maybe I would have started even sooner. People love stories about overnight success. They imagine a single moment, a lucky break. A sudden transformation where the invisible girl becomes untouchable. That's a lie. What they don't see are the nights when your eyes burn from staring at a screen that refuses to reward your effort. The mornings when you wake up already tired. The days when rejection becomes so normal it stops hurting. And that's when it becomes dangerous. Because pain means you still care. And I cared. Obsessively. After that day in the cafeteria, I disappeared. Not physically. I still went to school, still sat in the same classrooms, still heard the same whispers and muffled laughter behind my back. But something inside me withdrew. I stopped trying to be liked, stopped trying to explain myself, stopped hoping. Instead, I started watching, listening, learning. Vanessa continued being Vanessa, center of attention, surrounded by people who laughed at everything she said, even when it wasn't funny. Especially when it wasn't funny. But I noticed something no one else did. She needed it. The attention, the control, the constant validation. It wasn't confidence, it was hunger. And hunger makes people predictable. Meanwhile, I built something in silence. At first, it was small, ridiculously small. I started coding late at night, teaching myself from free forums, broken tutorials, anything I could get my hands on. My laptop would crash every 2 hours, forcing me to start over more times than I can count. But I didn't stop, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to fit into someone else's world. I was creating one where I decided the rules. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into something else, an obsession. I stopped sleeping properly, stopped caring about anything that didn't directly contribute to what I was building. At school, I became background noise. And for the first time, that worked in my favor, because no one notices the girl they've already dismissed. No one pays attention when she changes. Except someone did. His name was Daniel. He wasn't popular. Not invisible either. The kind of person who existed comfortably in the middle, unnoticed unless you looked closely. And one day, he did. "You're different," he said, sitting across from me in the library without asking. I didn't look up from my screen. "No, I'm not." "You are," he insisted. "You stopped reacting." That made me pause. Not because he was right, but because he noticed. "That's not a good thing," I said quietly. He shrugged. "Depends. Sometimes not reacting means you're planning something." I finally looked at him then. Really looked. And for a split second, I felt something unfamiliar. Exposure. Like he could see too much. "You should mind your own business," I told him. "I am," he replied calmly. "You're interesting." I almost laughed. No one had ever used that word for me before. And yet, I didn't tell him to leave. That was my first mistake. Because Daniel became the only person who saw fragments of what I was building. Not everything. Never everything. But enough. Enough to ask questions. Enough to get curious. And curiosity is dangerous. Especially when you're building something that isn't just a project, but an escape. Meanwhile, Vanessa's attacks didn't stop. They evolved. Subtle comments, quiet sabotage, little things that wouldn't get her in trouble but would remind me exactly where I belonged. One day she leaned over my desk during class, her perfume suffocating. "Still here?" she whispered. "I thought people like you eventually just disappear." I didn't respond. And that bothered her more than anything. I could feel it. The shift. She needed a reaction, and I wasn't giving her one. That's when she started pushing harder. Rumors, whispers, things that spread faster than truth ever could. Suddenly, I wasn't just pathetic. I was weird, obsessive, creepy. People started avoiding me more openly. Even teachers looked at me differently. And for a moment, just a moment, I felt it again. That old feeling. Like maybe she was right. like maybe I should disappear. But then I looked at my screen, at what I had built, at what I was still building, and something inside me hardened. No, I whispered to myself, not this time. Because the truth was, I was closer than anyone realized. Closer to something big, something powerful, something that could change everything. But success doesn't arrive quietly. It attracts attention, the wrong kind. And the day everything started to spiral was the day someone stole my work. I remember the exact moment, opening my laptop, seeing files missing, code altered, access logs that didn't belong to me. My heart dropped so fast it felt physical. No. I checked everything. Again. And then I saw it. A login from a device that wasn't mine, and one name attached to it. Daniel. The only person who had ever gotten close enough. The only person who had seen enough. The only person I had almost trusted. I sat there staring at the screen, my hands cold, my thoughts racing faster than I could control. Of course, I whispered, because that's how it always goes, doesn't it? You don't get betrayed by strangers, you get betrayed by the ones who made you feel seen. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. Vanessa wasn't my biggest problem anymore. Not even close. Because whatever Daniel had taken, he knew exactly what it was worth. And if I didn't act fast, everything I had built would no longer belong to me. I didn't confront Daniel right away. That's what the old me would have done. Emotional, impulsive, desperate for answers. But I wasn't her anymore. Instead, I sat there in the dim glow of my screen, forcing myself to breathe slowly, methodically, like every second mattered. Because it did. Panic destroys precision. And precision was all I had left. Think, I whispered, staring at the access logs again. Daniel hadn't just copied random files. He knew exactly what to take. That meant one thing. This wasn't curiosity. This was intent. And suddenly, every conversation we'd ever had replayed in my head. Every question, every casual glance at my screen. Every moment I thought he was just interested. No. He had been studying me. The realization didn't hurt as much as I expected. It didn't even feel like betrayal anymore. It felt like confirmation. Like the world reminding me of a rule I should have never forgotten. Trust is just another vulnerability waiting to be exploited. But I didn't have time to dwell on that. Because if Daniel had my work, then he was already moving. And I needed to move faster. So I did something he didn't expect. I didn't go after him. I went around him. I traced the login, IP addresses, backdoor traces. Fragments of data most people wouldn't even know how to interpret. But I did. Because while everyone else had been living their lives, I had been building mine, piece by piece. And what I found made my blood run cold. Daniel hadn't taken my work for himself. He had handed it over to someone else. At first, it didn't make sense. Why steal something just to give it away? Unless you were never the one in control? Unless you were just the middleman? My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I followed the trail deeper, and then I saw the name. Not a username, not a random alias. A company, a real one. A fast-growing tech startup that had been making headlines for months. Innovative, disruptive. Visionary. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening, because I recognized it. Not from the news, from somewhere else. Somewhere much closer. And then it hit me, like a slow, suffocating realization crawling up my spine. Vanessa. Her father, that company, belonged to him. I leaned back in my chair, the room suddenly feeling too small, too tight. "No," I whispered, but the evidence didn't lie. Daniel wasn't the mastermind. He was just the bridge. And Vanessa, she hadn't just been trying to humiliate me, she had been watching me, waiting, positioning herself. The bullying, the rumors, the pressure, it wasn't just cruelty, it was strategy. Break me down, isolate me, make me invisible. So when the time came, no one would notice when something was taken from me. My hands started shaking again, but this time, I didn't try to stop it. Because this was different. This wasn't school anymore. This wasn't social hierarchy or popularity. This was something bigger, calculated, deliberate, dangerous. And for the first time, I understood the scale of what I was up against. "They planned this," I said out loud, the words tasting bitter. Not just Daniel, not just Vanessa, something much larger. And I had walked straight into it. For a moment, I felt it again. That old feeling, small, powerless, outmatched, like I was already too late. But then something unexpected happened. My screen flickered. A notification. Unknown source. My body tensed instantly. I hadn't connected to anything external. No messages should have been coming through. Slowly, carefully, I opened it. A single line appeared. "You're looking in the wrong direction." My heart skipped. "What?" Another message followed. "Daniel is not your enemy." I froze. That didn't make sense. I had proof. Logs, transfers, evidence. And yet, something about the message felt precise. Not random, not threatening, calculated. "Who is this?" I typed. The reply came almost instantly. "Someone who knows what they're really building." My breath caught. Because that sentence hit deeper than anything else. Not what I built, what they were building. As if my project had never truly been mine alone. As if someone had been watching from the beginning. My chest tightened. "Explain," I wrote. This time, there was a pause, long enough to make me wonder if I had imagined the whole thing. And then, "Meet me, if you want the truth." A location appeared, no name, no explanation, just coordinates. I stared at the screen, my mind racing through possibilities. Trap, test, opportunity. Or something worse, because deep down, I already knew one thing. If I ignored this, I would lose everything. But if I followed it, I might discover something I wasn't ready to face, something that would change everything I thought I understood. About Daniel, about Vanessa, about myself. And as I grabbed my jacket and stood up, one thought echoed louder than all the others. What if I was never the one in control of this story? I shouldn't have gone. Every instinct I had, the ones built from years of being overlooked, underestimated, and quietly surviving, told me this was a mistake. But instincts are complicated things. Sometimes they're warnings, sometimes they're invitations, and sometimes they're both. The location led me to an old office building on the edge of the city, the kind of place people forget exists. Half the lights were out. The sign near the entrance flickered like it couldn't decide whether to stay alive or give up. Fitting. I stepped inside anyway. The air smelled like dust and something colder, like abandonment. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing farther than I expected. No answer. Of course. Nothing about this was supposed to be easy. I walked deeper into the building, following the faint glow of a single lit room at the end of a long corridor. Each step felt louder than it should have, like the building itself was listening, watching, waiting. And then, you came. I stopped. The voice wasn't unfamiliar. It was worse than that. It was recognizable. Slowly. I turned. Daniel stood there. But something about him was different. Not nervous, not apologetic. Calm, too calm. You... I exhaled, my chest tightening. You set this up? Yes, he said simply. No denial, no hesitation. That should have made things easier. It didn't. Why? I demanded, stepping closer. You stole my work. You gave it to them. And now you want to... What? Explain yourself? I didn't steal it, he replied. I laughed. A sharp, bitter sound that didn't feel like it belonged to me. I have proof. I know, he said. I made sure you would. That stopped me. What does that even mean? It means, he said slowly, taking a step toward me, you're seeing exactly what they wanted you to see. My pulse spiked. Who is they? For a moment, he didn't answer. And in that silence, something clicked. Something terrifying. Vanessa, I whispered. Daniel's expression didn't change, but he didn't deny it. That company, I continued, my voice shaking despite my effort to control it. Her father, this was all planned, wasn't it? Partially, he said. Partially? I snapped. You think that makes it better? No, he replied quietly. It makes it worse. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Then explain it to me, I said, my voice dropping. All of it. Daniel studied me for a long moment, like he was deciding something. And then, you weren't supposed to succeed this fast. The words hit harder than any insult Vanessa had ever thrown at me. What? They knew you were talented, he continued. They noticed you early. Quiet people always get underestimated, until they don't. My stomach twisted. They wanted your work, he said, but they didn't expect you to build something this powerful. My mind raced. No, that doesn't make sense. If they wanted it, why not just take it? They tried. My breath caught. What do you think the rumors were for? He asked. The isolation, the pressure, that wasn't just Vanessa being cruel. It all started connecting, too fast, too clearly. They wanted me broken, I whispered. Yes. So I wouldn't fight back. Yes. My chest tightened painfully. And you? I asked, my eyes locking onto his. Where do you fit into all this? For the first time, Daniel hesitated. I was supposed to get close to you, he admitted. Gain your trust. Understand what you were building. Rage flared inside me. And then betray me? Yes. The honesty should have felt satisfying. It didn't, because something still didn't add up. Then why am I here? I asked. If you did your job, why warn me? Silence. Then, because they're not done. A chill ran down my spine. What do you mean, not done? Daniel stepped closer, lowered his voice. They don't just want your work, he said. They want you. My heart skipped. What? They realized something, he continued. Your code, it's not just innovative, it's adaptive. It learns. It evolves. I swallowed hard. And they can't replicate it without you. Everything inside me went cold. No, they're going to offer you something, he said. Money, power, recognition. And if I say no? I asked quietly. Daniel's gaze darkened. Then they'll take it anyway. The room fell silent. And in that silence, I understood. This was never about school, never about Vanessa, never about humiliation. That was just the beginning. This was about control, ownership, power, and I had built something valuable enough to make me a target. "So what?" I said finally, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm supposed to run?" "No," Daniel replied. "Then what?" He looked straight at me. "Fight." I let out a slow breath, because deep down, I already knew. Running had never been an option. Not for me, not anymore. "Okay," I said. Daniel frowned slightly. "Okay?" I met his gaze, a small, dangerous smile forming on my lips. They think they've been controlling this from the start. I stepped closer, but they made one mistake. "What mistake?" he asked. I held his gaze. They forgot who they were dealing with. And for the first time since all of this began, I felt it. Not fear, not anger. Something sharper, something stronger. Control. "Tell them I'll meet," I said calmly. Daniel's expression shifted. "You're walking into their hands." "No," I replied. My voice was quiet. Certain. "I'm walking into my endgame." Because if they wanted a war, they had just invited the wrong girl. And this time, I wasn't the one being watched. I was the one setting the trap. The meeting was set for the next evening. Of course it was. People like them don't rush. They orchestrate. They let anticipation do half the work. Fear does the rest. But fear wasn't part of me anymore. Not in the way they expected. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was anxious, because I was preparing. Every line of code I had written, I rewrote. Every vulnerability, I sealed. Every access point, I turned into a trap. They thought they understood what I built. They didn't. They only understood what I allowed them to see. And that was their second mistake. The first was underestimating me. The second was thinking I was alone. Because I wasn't. Daniel sat across from me, watching silently as I worked. "You're not just protecting it," he said after a while. "You're changing it." I didn't look up. "I'm evolving it." He leaned back slightly. "They're going to notice." "I want them to." That made him pause. "You're not planning to negotiate, are you?" I finally met his eyes. "What do you think?" A faint, almost reluctant smile crossed his face. "I think they have no idea what they're walking into." "Good," I said quietly, because that was the point. The next evening, I walked into a building that looked nothing like the one from the night before. Glass walls, clean lines, power disguised as elegance. Vanessa was already there. Of course she was. Some things never change. She stood near the center of the room, dressed exactly how I remembered. Flawless, controlled, untouchable. But when her eyes met mine, something flickered, just for a second. Recognition and something else. Uncertainty. "Well," she said, her voice smooth, practiced. "Look who decided to show up." I stepped closer, unhurried, confident. Not the girl from the cafeteria. Not even close. "You've been busy," she added, crossing her arms. "Impressive, for someone who didn't belong." I almost smiled. "Funny," I said calmly. "You spent years trying to convince me of that." Her lips tightened slightly. "And yet, here you are," she replied. "In my world." I stopped right in front of her, close enough to see the details most people missed. The tension behind her eyes, the calculation, the fear she was trying to bury. I leaned in just a little. "This was never your world," I said softly. The room went quiet. Not just between us, the entire room. Because we weren't alone. Executives, investors, people with power, watching, waiting, judging. Vanessa straightened, recovering quickly. She always did. You built something valuable, she said, shifting into a more formal tone. Something we're very interested in. Interested? I echoed. Yes, another voice joined in. Her father. Of course. He stepped forward, calm, authoritative, the kind of man people trust without knowing why. We'd like to make you an offer, he continued. I nodded slightly. Go on. A partnership, he said. Resources, scale, global reach, everything you need to turn your work into something extraordinary. And in return, I asked. A small pause. Then, control, he said. There it was. Honesty. I respected that. At least a little. And if I refuse? I asked quietly. Vanessa's eyes locked onto mine. You won't, she said. Certain. Like she believed she already knew how this would end. I held her gaze. And for a moment, I saw it again. That girl from the cafeteria. The one who thought power meant being untouchable. The one who thought I was nothing. I smiled. A real one this time. And that's when everything changed. Actually, I said, my voice calm, steady, you already lost. The room shifted. Confusion, tension. Vanessa frowned. What are you talking about? I pulled out my phone, tapped once, and then every screen in the room flickered. Presentations disappeared. Data changed. Access systems locked. A ripple of quiet panic spread instantly. What did you do? Her father demanded. I looked at him, then at Vanessa, then back at the room. I finished what I started, I said, because while they had been planning to control me, I had already taken control of them. Their systems, their infrastructure, their data, everything. You built your company on stolen foundations, I continued, on manipulation, on control. Silence, heavy, unavoidable. And now, I added softly, you don't own any of it. Vanessa stepped back. For the first time, she looked shaken. No, that's not possible, she said. I tilted my head slightly. Just like it wasn't possible for me to matter, right? That hit. Hard. Her father tried to regain control. You're making a mistake, he said sharply. You don't understand what you're doing. I met his gaze, and for the first time, he hesitated. I understand exactly what I'm doing, I replied, because this was never about revenge. Not really. It was about balance, about rewriting the rules, about proving something they refuse to believe. That power doesn't belong to the loudest person in the room, or the richest, or the most feared. It belongs to the one who knows how to build it and protect it. I turned to leave, and right before I reached the door, Vanessa's voice stopped me. Wait. I paused, slowly turned back, and what I saw was something I never expected. Not arrogance, not cruelty, something else, something broken. She hesitated, struggled, then forced the words out. I need a job. The room froze. The irony was almost too perfect. I studied her, really studied her, and for the first time, I didn't see a villain. I saw someone who had never learned how to be anything else. You spent years trying to make me feel small, I said quietly. She didn't deny it. And now, I continued. Her voice dropped. I have nothing. Silence. Long. Heavy. Final. And in that moment, I realized something unexpected. This wasn't victory. Not the kind people imagine. It was something more complicated, more human, because power gives you choices. And those choices define you. I stepped closer, close enough that only she could hear me. I could say no, I whispered. Her breath caught. And maybe I should. I paused. Just long enough. But I won't. Her eyes widened slightly. Not relief. Shock. Because I'm not you, I said. And with that, I walked away. Not as the girl they humiliated, not as the victim, but as someone who had rewritten her own story. And maybe, just maybe, that's the real question. If you had the power, would you destroy the people who hurt you? Or would you become something they could never understand? If this story made you feel something, if you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or pushed aside, then maybe it's time to write your own ending. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. What would you have done in my place?